Hi, welcome back to my studio practice. It's nice to have you here. I want to show you what is happening today. So we're on the quetzal again today. Hopefully that'll come into focus for you. Okay, so let's turn it sideways so we've got a good look at it. Okay, I know it's a little bit odd, but it fits it all into the screen while I have the camera set at this kind of distance. The bit that's of interest to me today is the guitar headstock, this part here, where the tuning pegs are, where the rollers are. Now, since we were last together, I put in the nut for the junction where the fingerboard meets the headstock, and I've left out the squares to indicate where the strings are going to go, because I'm trying to get a kind of level of believability here. Okay. So it's the headstock that is of interest to me, because the way it's made is sometimes it can just be a single piece, but sometimes there's a layer of wood here, there's a light veneer sandwiched between that and the top layer. So you end up with a sandwich of different colours, like 1, 2, 3. And that can be seen on the better guitars or cheaper classical guitars that are trying to look like they're more expensive than they actually are. It's a fact. It's true. So I would like to show you the first of my guitars. This one here is my Matsuoka guitar, and you can see the nut, you can see the rollers, you can see the tuning pegs, which are normally facing downward and away. This, you can only see the tops of them, but when I do my art, I deliberately shove them out sideways like that, so that flower forms can come out of them. So it's just a device that I use to make it probable, impossible. It just makes it a possibility. Now, if you look at the headstock here, there is two colours. You should be able to see, hopefully, two colours. So there is a very, very thin veneer on the edge of this guitar. So you can see that there's a kind of reddish orange wood with a kind of light, a darker Indian rosewood on top. So this is a sandwich of two, really. It's a biscuit with a topping. Yeah, a biscuit with a little bit of Nutella on top. But still, it's still a nice guitar. And it was on its way to the skip when someone that I know asked if I would want a guitar, and I've had that for about 20 years now. But I invested in this handmade classical guitar by a maker in Arbroath, which is about some 150 miles away from where I live. And you can see the different woods that are being used. Again, you can see that this is just a sandwich of two. You can see that the main wood is this lovely orangey colour, but the veneer on top is a much, much thicker layer of veneer, which you can see. So this is probably, the red on it is probably cypress, or cedar, sorry, it should be cedar, which is very red, with a layer of a veneer of Indian rosewood on top. Okay, but the signboard for this one, beautiful as it is spruce. It's a lovely creamy yellow, almost a Naples yellow. Whereas my factory produced guitar, which has been gathering dust, I've been neglecting it, is this lovely reddish cedar. And this is the version that I want for the small guitar in the background. So, the headstock is of interest to me because I want my reddish cedar layer. I would like a light or creamy veneer on top of that, and the Indian rosewood, so it's going to be a sandwich of three. So if I do it like this, when we look inside the headstock, we should have the reddish colour, which is the main part of the guitar, a light creamy veneer, a white one, and then the top of the guitar, the outermost layer, would be a dark Indian rosewood. So you would see, hopefully what I'm aiming for is 3 layers. Cedar, some kind of light veneer. I think sycamore is cedar. I think sycamore is quite light, and then on top of that, sort of Indian rosewood. Indian rosewood. Now that would allow me, the Indian rosewood would allow me to do the kind of scraping effect, sgraffito effect that I use for the palettes, like this. So you have a lighter lower layer, you put a darker layer on top, and then you scrape back to reveal the layer. Well, the other thing about a guitar headstock is that it should be made symmetrically, what's called book matched, right down the middle. So a piece of wood with the same grain, when you open it up, it's a mirror image of it either side of the midline. So that's what I'm aiming for. I'm going for a bit of realism in the guitar, in the detailing. This is the guitar in the distance that I feel should have a warm reddish kind of cedar colour. And the last part of it today, you may sense that I'm struggling today. I'm not clear with my expressions, or my thoughts are not clear today, and I feel quite mentally tired as well. Is that this area here has been a problem to me. I haven't really known what to do with it. But this chessboard, when I looked at the painting over a long period, just feels as if the chessboard wants to extend over into this sort of mirror palette shape. We have the palette shape here, and this is almost like an echo of that palette shape, but in a chessboard. Purely accidental, purely an unconscious thing, but since looking at it, I think the dark and the light would be nice to carry on across here. So I may just block this in black. and then do what I did with this side here, which is just only paint the white squares or the white check on it quite lightly. Now, quite speedily is what I'm trying to say. So paint the white on top of the black quite speedily. And because it goes down in a irregular fashion, it's got this kind of mottled appearance, which suggests a little bit of marbling. But it's a technique that I want to develop further. There is more that we should be able to do with this. But that cut the workload in half. There was very little to do, so I did this quite speedily. But I did it about 3 or 4 days ago, and the paint is still tacky, so it's taken a bit of time to dry. And that's it. I think by doing this, by indicating the layers of the headstock at least, especially the rosewood, would help shape the feet a little bit better. We'll be able to see them more clearly. And that's about it. You can see that since we last spoke, I did some moss work. I did the split in the bark. This is to be lightened. This is to be made more, various shades of tints and tones of brown. The olive is still a bit juicy, where I put it on extra thick. But the sky has dried a little bit darker, so we can see a separation between the sky and this bubble come design, halo, whatever it is. So there's quite a lot to do today, and I should maybe really get on and do it, even though every fibre of my being is saying just rest. So I'm torn between the duty to keep doing live streaming because it's good for me to have something to do, versus the appalling sense of just wanting to lie down and go back to bed. So, this is a warts and all live stream. I know that there's no live viewers or there's no one pursuing these at the moment, but in future you may be listening into these and just understand that sometimes it's a battle, but it's one that I know that will reward the effort that's invested in it. Okay, thanks for listening to me warble on. Okay, guitars. I'm tempted to draw to get an idea of the kind of shape, the kind of symmetrical shape. And the headstock have these different kind of scrolls and designs and things, which the different makers used to do as like part of their signature. I'm not going to fuss over detail today. It's just a block in, just blocking in the colours so as to get local colour in. To suggest where things are. So this first layer seems to be reddish, like cedar. And if we go for colours straight out the tube, burnt umber suggests itself. That should be, burnt sienna. Excuse me. Burnt sienna should be the colour that I'm looking for, I think, as a base. Straight out the tube, it should have a kind of reddish quality to it. Let's see how we get on. So, this layer hasn't had a lot of treatment. And I can see that these shapes in here need to be modelled so that they're slightly more symmetrical than they are. That's very juicy. So straight out the tube, that paint is really quite juicy. So there's the reddish colour that I'm looking for, giving a depth of line, which is the thickness of the headstock, which then rounds off into this I don't know what you call that. Spade shape. It's a spade. Resembles a spade. Okay. A little bit more material in there, a little bit more paint on the brush. So there at least is the thickness of the headstock mapped out in a very, very basic way. But I suspect that the drawing of this will need to be made more and more precise as we go along. Okay, so that's that side. And I hope that the camera can pick up the lovely reddish cocoa colour that we've got here. Now, because it's at an angle, there is slightly more background that should be visible through this one, through this side, this aperture or opening in the headstock, but less on this side. So again, in this painting, it is my desire to be a lot more realistic than many of the other kind of Elassomorph paintings or streams of consciousness paintings that have been attempted before. So that's a block in. Let's tidy that up by scraping. Okay. This will be revisited, but I just want to get a sense of where the drawing is, especially when I go in with my darks. Because unlike this one, the palette here, I went in with my lightest colour, put dark on, and then scraped through. So this one here, I want to put a dark colour on, maybe scrape through, but then I want to put lighter colours on to create the wood kind of detailing. Next, I've gone from the ivory brush to a rigger, a long rigger, and my white paint is still juicy. I don't want it to be pure white, so I want a kind of creaminess to it. There we go. My water mix has some linseed oil in it. Right, so on this side, that was the bottom layer. So just above that layer, we have a thin layer of, sycamore or some other colour, some other wood, sorry, which I have to show as this light line. Working wet and wet, there's been a little bit of pickup on it, but this will probably be worked on quite a lot. Because I'm keen to get, like I said, I'm keen to get this looking fairly realistic. Underneath the toe of the quetzal. Okay, this line has gone a little bit too thick on the right hand side. So what I'll do is I will try and correct that as I go over with my darkest value, which is probably going to be the cooler of the two umbers. So can you guess what that is? The cooler version of the two umbers. You've got raw umber and burnt umber. That's right. The answer is raw umber. Okay. Now the quetzal should be seen through the gap. So I'm just mixing up some cadmium yellow light and some viridian. And on this side, a little bit of the quetzal would be seen. So I'm just going in with a little bit of suggestion that the bird can be seen through the gap. Because, like I say, the headstock is moved away from us. So we can see more of the left-hand side and less of the right-hand side. So it's not facing directly towards us where we can see half and half, but it's angling away. And so that affects how we see the apertures where the the rollers and the headstock is. So again, trying to correct my drawing, my freehand drawing with the paint. So yeah, I feel as if I should have gotten into oil painting a lot earlier. It has been a bit of a hang-up for me. I have had a little bit of an issue with belief, I suppose. Being able to remember all the kind of rules about paint, oil paint, fat over lean, and how to keep the mixes, how to keep the mixes consistently following that pattern. Now, I'm a little bit dissatisfied with this part of the quetzal here because it looks as if the tuning pegs are changing angle a little bit. If that one is in line, this one is slightly out of line. So I think what I want to do is sort of shorten it a little bit that way and just check against the screen what effect that has. Okay, and then it has to be lowered a little bit on this side too. And again, just map out where the quetzal appears. Okay, so the quetzal will be there. Again with this one, shortening the tuning peg, but also making a kind of trapezoid out of it by creating a little bit of an angle, like so. And again with this one here, it's possibly positioned slightly more correctly, but then it's too big on this side, so that needs a little bit of correcting. Okay, so there at least we can separate out what is guitar, what is bird. And the headstock would come in that way, and there'd be a little bit more bird visible there. Okay, so now it's just occurred to me as well that since we have the thickness of the headstock here, we should also be able to see the thickness of the headstock on this side as well. So I'll go back into my ivory brush. This is a 0 short flat ivory brush. So the series is ivory. And it's got a nice square edge, but I've been painting so much this last month compared to what I normally do that it's showing signs of wear and tear. So possibly about here. Okay, and join up gaps like so, and monitor it on the screen. And I suppose that's okay. There we go. And the same again. It would need a white veneer layer visible on this side. So just above the cedar, we would have the same veneer visible. It would follow the headstock round to the neck joint. And there's a lovely kind of delicate curve where it joins the neck before the fingerboard. So that's all looking a little bit more believable. Next, the headstock we agreed would be not the burnt umber, which is a lot warmer, but the cooler, if I can find it, the cooler raw umber. I will ultimately be making a rosewood effect. So Indian rosewood effect. And so I feel that to do that, maybe the raw umber is the better choice. I've loaded up the brush quite thickly with very juicy paint, which is bulging on the surface as I paint it. So I've painted it really in a quite juicy manner. I'll have to go back and respect that line. If I was working in acrylics, I would probably have masked that straight edge with some masking tape. just to help it, just to keep that line in and keep it correct. So the headstock for me would go up to about there and then change direction and head back towards the apex of the headstock in that direction. Okay, so I feel as if that was the correct choice of brown. It already feels close to rosewood for me. Again, very thick application of raw umber. And there's a reason for that, because I want to have material that I can scrape into. So I am planning on using my very favourite sgraffito technique. Okay. I think I have to change my hand angle here so that I can get that line in. Also correct it a little bit. If I overshoot that edge a little bit, I've still got this space here to correct the edge a little bit more. But I'm still unresolved. But over the kind of check which is going to go there should be plants maybe growing out. I was also considering pea pods for some reason. I don't know where that came from. So again, a fairly heavily loaded brush with a reasonably thick application of paint. Almost at this stage neat from straight from the tube. And it has crossed my mind whether I should introduce some of my linseed and water mix. So there is linseed in the water, and at each new session I drop just a little bit more linseed in to help observe the fat over lean rule. So that's flowing much better already. With practice you will be able to see when you get the mix right. So, and I have said in other episodes, is it episodes? Other live streams, that I'm normally quite stingy with paint, but painting the last little while has encouraged me to be a little bit more generous. Okay, I'm still being cautious about the area where the feet are. So a little bit more bold and confident, using the square profile of the ivory brush to help indicate that line. Lost a little bit on the left hand side, so I may have to go back in. With some more. A little bit too juicy. That's my daughter and dog returning from a walk, so get some privacy. There we go. So now, yeah, I can see a warmth in the thickness of the original wood for the headstock, a light veneer sandwiched between the darker colour, which is trying to portray Indian rosewood. And a thought has just crossed my mind, and we'll see. I'll just do an experiment in a moment before I go in with the embossing tool. Just smoothing out some of the larger, the larger areas, the thicker applications of paint up to that point there. Return, change direction. So now we have the tricky space between the feet, because for me a dissatisfying part at the moment is the fact that the feet are sort of rudimentary. I've made an assumption that the bird has toes that are 3 forward and 1 back. Parrots have 2 forward and 2 back. So I want to try and keep that scroll there. It's just it's a little bit tricky. Okay. But the dark is helping me now to mask out the flaws in the original drawing. So I think what I want to do is go in with the rigger. This is the largest of my riggers. It's a number 2, Rosemary and Co. Sable Blend. It's a series 771, I think. And with the right amount of linseed and water mix, I can carefully draw in the gap, indicating the form of the guitar headstock and the shape of the toes simultaneously. go. I am happier that that is a lot neater. I'm really pleased with that. For a person who didn't want to do any kind of artwork today, yet knowing how much it benefits me, I feel I made the right choice to be involved with this. But one of the things about ME is it does rob you of the belief that you can do things. And sometimes tasks, including simple ones like getting out of bed, feel impossible. This drawing needs corrected here. This is really difficult, this part here. Because there has to be a kind of mathematical symmetry between two shapes which are viewed at different angles, and so they're not viewed mathematically the same. They're not present the same image, but we know, our intelligence tells us that they must be the same. And so, while different, they have to sort of match. So there's a thick point, and the tapering of the toes at the end creates a kind of knuckle on the bird, which I'm just assuming. I haven't done any research specifically on the foot patterning of the quetzal. It's not a thing that people do. Just don't know that kind of detail. Okay, so there should be an angle there from the headstock. As it tilts away, there should be a little area where it comes back in upon itself. And since I want to be able to see it, I'm just going to draw an outline, because I'm definitely going to go back in and do the bird's feathers, but I want to know where the guitar is, where these tuning pegs are in relation to everything else that's going on. There we go. And of course there would be shading anyway, where the turn of the neck is, that little angle there. What I haven't done successfully is created the slight nib that has to happen there. There has to be a little nib. So I'm scraping that material away to remind myself that happens. Okay. And speaking of scraping material away, this is now the moment. But first, if I can scale that down, I can see that we are how many minutes into the stream? Normally I've got a sense of where the hour mark is. That's where I naturally feel I want to cut off. Okay, this is a problem for me now, because I want to scrape into the guitar headstock, like so, mathematically down the centre, knowing that the book matching, which goes on here, is symmetrical on either side. So, how do I do this? Well, I suppose if I come in at an angle there, and scrape in, then that angle can be replicated on the opposite side, coming there. So if I pick a couple of strokes there, above the headstock there, then similarly there. Let's try a large piece of grain coming down there. So we'll mirror that roughly on the other side. And so we can do some features beside that and copy it there. So a little bit of scribbling on there. And then some more light grain there. So that has to be some more light grain there. And we have a problem in that we need to find a way to match on both sides and still have a kind of organic feel to it. So I'm doing my best. I'm trying my hardest here to try and create this illusion. Okay, so the idea that had occurred to me was that I could use my rake brushes. If I can just find them. So the rakes are these ones that look spiky and combed. Spiky like the top of Bart Simpson's head. And so they really should act to create a kind of grainy striation. But I'm not sure how effective they are. What I am noticing is, however, that they're taking the edge of the abruptness of those strokes and nudging it back. So I have now learned something. By all means, scrape away, but then nudge it back. Scrape and nudge, scrape and nudge. Okay, so let's try some more scraping. Down the centre again. And on the sides where we've lost some material. Let's create a knot. Oh, I know. We could do a big one of these. We'll do where the grain creates a shimmer. And that kind of replicates what has happened elsewhere on the palette. Let's go up the side here and create some shimmers. And same again here, a little shimmer. And a little shimmer here. It's basically a sort of letter N. That's what I'm trying to do. So on my darkest value, just gently knock those back a little bit. Just take the edge off them a little. Okay. And is it okay for a first layer? Maybe. Maybe that's okay. Next thing I want to do is put in a black. But out of curiosity, this black here was straight carbon black out of the tube, mixed with water, I think, and no linseed at all. Whereas in previous paintings of this type, I've used French ultramarine and raw or burnt umber to create a kind of pseudo black, a kind of fake black. So I'm going to give it the opportunity to check either side. And I know that the umber paintings, sorry, the umber paint typically dries very fast. So, and I believe that even if you mix other paints in with them, the fast drying nature of the umber paint helps to encourage the other colours to speed up a little. Okay, so what I want to do is gently taper this in, and also remember that notch. So those colours are very close in tone, but as close as I am to them, I can see enough of a difference. However, I will literally underscore it by making a little line, and that will help me see that. So I do find this graffito technique very versatile, very useful. I'm going to correct the roundness of this drawing, this here. So since I've stumbled upon the notion that this curve, which happened quite accidentally and was unplanned, seems to reflect the curve there, I think I will accentuate these curves to try and bring that impression out. So I will do a little bit more to encourage that notion. Not too much. So and again, this is me practicing that time-saving trick. So if I block in the area for checking, if I block it all in black, first of all, then the only squares that I have to paint are the white squares. And by finding the edge of the white squares, or rectangles, I also find the edge of the other colour. Okay, so I was doing some research on branches and saw a lovely sort of dead branch. I'm going to say that, a lovely dead branch. It seems odd that you can admire the deadness of a branch. But this branch was so coated with other materials growing out of it that there was these lovely, it's like a row of lovely little round leaves, which look like leaf cutter ants carrying leaves back to the mound, back to the nest. That I felt that I wanted to incorporate it. I wanted to include that in this painting. I just thought it was such a nice design. It had pattern, it had repetition, and so built up a kind of rhythm there. So here I am just smoothing out the bumps, making sure that there's a fine enough coating of this. And no surprises for when I go back with white. I'm kind of hoping that this will be dry, so tomorrow I can do the white layer, which will be slower drying, but be able to put that layer on top. So let's correct that drawing. Correcting that wee bit of the drawing there. Okay. Nice, and it's made that pop out, made that branch pop out a little bit. Okay. So, got the headstock in. I've got my little area here done. The next thing that I was going to suggest was the burnt sienna as a very light coating for this guitar in the distance. Hopefully we can set this one up here. Okay, so we're going for cedar top. Oh, that's very strong. So I'll just dab with the hope that I can spread out with another brush. Spread out the material, maybe with this one. And get a much lighter colour, more transparent. Or maybe more accurately, more translucent. In this mix here, there is a little bit more linseed oil to create a glaze. So that the light from the titanium white, the lightness of that influences the glaze that's going on top. Okay, so, but also I could have gone for the spruce, which I showed you at the start of this session, a lovely creamy light guitar top. But the red that's in this colour I think will work better with the green which is in the quetzal. And also the eyelashes that go with this eyeball are going to be the green ones that started appearing in the other Elassomorph paintings that I've been doing recently. So green eyelashes seem to be a thing for me in these paintings. Let me re-establish the side of that guitar. Okay. That's very dark. but I think I need it to tidy up that little design. So it's very black looking. I feel I can afford to go in wet on wet with the sienna mix, the burnt sienna mix. So that's a bit neater. And I'm trying to think if there's any more jobs to do that I said I would do at the start of the session. So let me see. Headstock, this puddle area here, and the guitar here. I think that's about it for this session. Yeah. I think that's enough. And once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this studio practice. You may notice there's a bit that I've left unpainted. I'm doing that deliberately. I'm leaving a dry spot so I can actually pick up the painting. So other areas will be dry when I paint this in, and so I'll be able to pick it up. But I still don't know what's going to be there. So, a summary. We painted in the headstock for the guitar. We did layers to show the wood with veneer and another layer of veneer as a sandwich, and we've got that depth in. By doing so, we've managed to indicate the feet in a much neater way, although when the camera isn't rolling, I may go back into that and actually put in a cleaner yellow so that I'm a little bit happier with that. Who knows? We've made a kind of reddish glaze for the cedar guitar top here, and we did that using burnt sienna, and that's it. So thank you again for spending your time with me. I hope that you may have learned a little trick, but at least gotten inspiration to enjoy your creativity wherever you are. So thanks again for watching. See you again in the next one. Bye bye.